From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up today on AgDay, Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour scouts hitting the fields from the west.
The yields are all over the board so far that we've found.
To the east.
The eastern leg starts in Ohio. We'll see what the crop looks like and check on maturities.
Kicking off a week of ground truthing USDA's prospects of potentially record crops this year. Trade talks take center stage in Washington, and it's trade directing crop prices.
Well, the headlines have pushed the market around in both directions.
The muted milk market showing signs of strength, but it all hinges on trade.
The reality is we could take that lower.
And getting back into the school routine starts with breakfast.
AgDay, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Tyne Morgan. Clinton Griffiths is on the road with the Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour. Well, the first day of the tour started in two states which USDA expects will both see record yields this year. Ohio in the east and South Dakota in the west. Now the big question now, will our crop scouts find those big crops?
Coverage of the Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour is brought to you by Pioneer. You can always count on your local Pioneer team to provide year-round support. Year after year, Pioneer is committed to the success of every acre on your farm. Pioneer, with you from the word go.
Later this morning, field scouts on crop tour will begin their second full day of crop sampling. Over the 4-day tour, they will measure 2,000 corn and soybean samples across the Corn Belt. Now on the east, scouts started in Ohio and ended their day Monday in Indiana. USDA is expecting Ohio farmers are growing record-sized corn and soybean crops at 180 and 56 bushels to the acre respectively. Both of those are bigger than last year's final numbers released by USDA in January, and also considerably higher than what Pro Farmer found last year. Well, what can we expect this year? Clinton is on the tour and kicks off with a look at crop conditions. Clinton?
That's right, Ty. In the last couple of years I've been in Ohio, there's been such variation in the crops, from the stands to the quality, the maturity. This year, however, it looks like Ohio is off and running. Eastern Leg Tour scouts up with the sun.
Had a couple skips where you can see where the planter skipped.
Beginning with an Ohio crop that USDA says is well ahead in maturity.
We had some great heat units throughout the season, and they've just really matured well.
Hilliard, Ohio farmer Neil Weber says this spring a majority of the state's crop hit the ground in just a week's time.
Yeah, well, we were late like most of the Midwest. So when that good week came around, everyone was just working around the clock. And I mean, I would guess that 85% of the corn was put in that week.
The more mature the crop is, the better indicator it typically gives us, because you know, you're closer to the finish line.
Added up, it's a corn and soybean crop that USDA pegs as roughly 75% good to excellent, despite a window or two of dryness.
Ohio is one of those states where if they get the moisture, they can have very good growing conditions and very good yields. And if they don't, it shows stress, and we're not seeing the stress so far.
But I think these late rains will help fill out what pods are there.
Uniform, they're dark green, they're tall. You know, it's a good, healthy plant. You know, have to wait and see what the pod counts are. Just because it's a healthy plant doesn't mean that necessarily the pod counts are high. But you can tell that it hasn't had a lot of stress, and at the times when it was stressed, it probably got some moisture right behind it.
You know, a month and these guys could be combining these beans, and a couple of weeks this corn will be mature. So things are thundering right along.
For the corn, now 10 to 20 points ahead of maturity, the biggest question remains test weights and ear counts.
The ear counts are high, not surprising, because USDA told us that in their 10 objective states they had record ear count. But every single sample we've pulled has been dented corn.
While scouts move on to Indiana,
Ready to go?
Ohio farmers like Weber are prepping for harvest.
USDA says Ohio's going to be a record crop. Anything to tell you now?
No, I'd say they probably hit it right on the mark.
They're just hoping good yields can outweigh shrinking prices this growing season. Reporting on the eastern leg of the tour, I'm Clinton Griffiths.
Thanks, Clinton. The Western leg began in South Dakota, where scouts measured just a handful of counties. USDA is projecting a record corn yield at 170 bushels an acre. Last year, the state averaged 145 bushels an acre. Last year, Pro Farmer pegged the state at 138. Well, it's been a wet first day for the scouts on the Western leg of crop tour as they head from southeast South Dakota down towards Grand Island, Nebraska. South Dakota fields are soaked after a big rain event occurred over the weekend. Betsy Gibbon has the latest.
Tyne, every year scouts on the western leg of crop tour meet in Minnehaha County, South Dakota, an area which received a flash flood warning on Sunday, and that's the second one in 2 weeks. And now farmers even living in adjacent counties are saying something they don't normally want to say in August, and that is we don't need any more rain.
Years past, we're begging for rain this time of year, but not this year.
Gray fills the skies another day in southeast South Dakota as Lincoln County farmer Kurt Schneiderman hopes his season does not end the way it began.
Some I got in time, but some late. We had a lot of rains early this spring.
Schneiderman planted into June.
The crop looks amazingly pretty good for all the wet weather, except for, like I say, the drowned outs. There's going to be yield missing there from that.
It has been wet.
We followed scouts who made a handful of stops in Lincoln and Turner counties.
The yields are all over the board so far that we've found. There's also some nitrogen issues in the fields that you can see as you drive by.
Maturity is behind in some fields since farmers planted late and sprayed late in the area. Some of the samples on lower ground yielding below USDA's estimated yield average of 170 bushels per acre for the state, while higher ground is yielding at or above a longer route.
So there's still potential to be made there, and with the moisture, and if it should finish all right. Some of the other issues in the cornfield started too long ago. The ear length is down, there's a little bit of tip back.
While both crops need heat, some farmers hope the rain will fill out the soybeans.
Soybeans have had some decent pod counts, and the same thing, there's some drowned out spots, but the beans are clean.
As cloudy skies linger, Schneiderman hopes the heat will arrive to finish out the crop he started.
As long as we get some heat now, we'll be fine.
Now the Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour only takes samples from the southeastern portion of the state, but it's a completely different situation when you go to the north. That area is very dry. One farmer I talked with said if you go to Spink and Falk counties in South Dakota, some of that crop is so dry that it's zeroing out. Reporting in southeastern South Dakota, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Thanks, Betsy. Well, one of the best ways to follow Crop Tour is via Twitter. We'll be using hashtag PFTour18 as our handle. There'll also be constant updates on agweb.com. And we'll also have daily recaps on Ag Day all this week. And Clinton will host a special edition of the Crop Tour this Monday, which will include the official Pro Farmer Crop Tour estimates for 2018. Well, on the heels of a California Circuit Court ruling against Monsanto in a major glyphosate case, California Supreme Court now handing Monsanto another loss. The state's highest court declining to hear Monsanto's appeal over the glyphosate label. Monsanto appealing a lower court's decision, which lists glyphosate as a chemical that can cause cancer or birth defects. Well, the drought-fueled wildfires in California are creating some rather terrifying images, like a massive fire-nado. From this angle inside a fire truck, you can see in the upper right-hand corner of your screen the churning tornado filled with fire, the size of 3 football fields. Wow. That fire overran a 17-year veteran of the fire department. In an official after-incident report, CAL FIRE says the smoke and fire tornado was 1,000 feet wide at its base and shot 7 miles into the sky. It reached speeds of up to 165 miles an hour. Temperatures likely exceeded 2,700 degrees. It was rated an F3 tornado. Wow. Well, back to the Midwest. It's a mature corn crop that some scouts are finding as they wade through the fields, and it's harvest that's already knocking on the door for some. We have details from this morning in the Weather Lab. Good morning.
Well, thanks, Tyne. Harvest is running 3 to 4 weeks ahead of normal in north central Kansas. Steve Conaway says they picked about 50 acres of high moisture corn before much needed rain hit last week. But it was too little too late, as the only other time they've ever harvested this early was during the drought of 2012. He says grain is drying fast as moisture dropped 4 points in 5 days. Here's a look at your wind speed forecast, and as we head through the next 24 hours, the strongest winds are going to be in the southwestern United States. We'll see them picking up in the afternoons in the eastern parts of the country, but really over towards the Four Corners region, southern Nevada, southeastern California is where we're going to be seeing the strongest winds as we get into our Wednesday morning. We'll have more on your national forecast coming up, but now here are some hometown temps.
Ag Day, brought to you by Top Third Ag Marketing. Farmer first with a plan for every market.
Still to come, could trade talks trump any crop supply news coming out of Crop Tour this week? We'll look at how trade-related headlines are impacting prices. Plus, one analyst says if a ceasefire with China doesn't happen soon, it could derail any hopes for higher milk prices this year. And getting back into the school routine with more than just school. Here now with Joe Vaklovic of Standard Grain. Joe, this tariff talk has really put a wet blanket on some of our markets, and we continue to hear, well, we may see some low-level trade talks happen with China. Last week, that sparked a positive reaction in the soybean market, but, really what needs to happen in order to sustain longer-term price gains?
Well, the headlines have pushed the market around in both directions. We'll see trade talks, and then we'll see trade talks fall apart, and the soybean market in particular will move kind of along with that news. What we need to see in order to sustain higher prices is obviously some sort of resolution here to the U.S.-China trade dispute or trade war, if you want to call it that. I don't think we're close. These are low-level talks, as it's been put, that are going to take place this week. So we've got a lot of work to do still, but the soybean market acts well when we see these type of headlines.
But does that surprise you? I mean, would you expect at this point, since we have seen so many headlines, that the market would be immune to some of these talks and really not react until action actually happens?
I think that there's probably some large speculators that are short the market that just don't want to get caught if something were to happen in regard to progress on the trade front. The other thing to keep in mind here is that China, over this last 10 days or so, has begun to unload some U.S. beans, and we may very well see some more of that. I think we will. It's just a matter of quantity at this point. They're going to buy beans despite the tariffs. It's just going to be a lesser amount. We really just don't know the quantity and the details.
So, Joe, then really what needs to happen in order to push prices higher? If these trade talks are still ongoing?
The perfect storm would be a lower yield from USDA and a resolution to the trade dispute. Your more likely scenario at this point is probably maybe a lower yield, but I'm not too confident we're going to get anything done on the trade front.
Yeah, that was my next question. Yeah. I mean, how likely are both of those scenarios?
I'm not super, for both of them to happen simultaneously, probably very unlikely, but it's a lot of wild cards here.
A lot of wild cards. Joe Vaklovic, thank you so much. We need to take a quick break here on Ag Day, but then we'll have a check of weather.
For more information about Standard Grain and its services, call Joe at 312-462-4438. Don't miss the 2018 Farm Progress Show, August 28th through August 30th in Boone, Iowa. Visit farmprogressshow.com for more information and to purchase tickets online.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Well, the main focus over the next 24 hours will be the eastern part of the country, where we're going to be seeing a low pressure system moving across, bringing some showers and thunderstorms. Putting this into motion, you'll see that's where most of the rain is going to be in the eastern half. We also have a low pressure system over towards the Four Corners region. That's going to be bringing some scattered showers and thunderstorms. The west coast is looking actually fairly dry over the next couple of days, and maybe a couple of scattered lingering showers as you get into parts of the central and eastern Corn Belt before high pressure starts to settle in towards the Great Lakes. Now, as this low moves a little further to the east, some of the plain states might see a shower or a thunderstorm as we get into our Wednesday forecast. Let's take a look at the precipitation estimate. The past 24 hours, we've seen some heavy rain in spots, especially up in the southern Great Lakes, all the way down towards the Gulf Coast. We've seen patchy areas of 2+ inches of rain. And as you add in the next 24 hours, you can see how it really focuses on the eastern part of the country, especially closer to the actual low pressure system on the northeastern part of the country. Again, we're going to see a few showers in the Four Corners region and starting to get into the Central Plains. Temperature wise, well, it's been a lot cooler behind that system. We're seeing temperatures getting back into the 70s for a lot of the northern tier of the United States. Very cool as you get over towards Billings, Montana. The hot weather remains in the south central and far southwest western United States where we still have some 90s. Into the overnight hours we go, and we'll see those temperatures a lot more comfortable for a lot of folks as we get into the 50s and into the lower 60s. Still some muggy 70s down towards Texas. And notice that we see the cooler temperatures continuing to spread there. Some cool for August type of temperatures, but the heat remains, especially right over Texas. Looking a little bit longer term, here's the jet stream, and you can see that trough that we are going to be seeing pushing to the east. We're going to see that ridge in the west, and that's going to start to build into the east by the time we get into the weekend. So we really expect to see a pretty good warm up for much of the eastern part of the country, especially later into the weekend and into the early part of next week, while we see another trough entering the western United States. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Winslow, Arizona, mostly cloudy for you today with some showers and thunderstorms possible and a high of 88 degrees. Valley City, North Dakota, sunshine and 74. And Carrollton, Ohio, look for some showers and thunderstorms with a high of 78 degrees.
Up next, it's trade that's taking center stage in Washington this week, but why it's a world stage watching any possible progress made. Plus, packing new folders, new pencils, and a common sense lunch when your kids head back to class. In our dairy report this week, it's trade that's in the spotlight. That's as the U.S. will host a lower-level Chinese trade delegation just this week, just days before the tariffs proposed on $16 billion worth of goods are set to go into effect. Also this week, the Trump administration is expected to unveil details on its tariff aid package for farmers. Now, the tariffs on $16 billion of Chinese goods is set to go into play Thursday. That's unless trade talks with Chinese delegation on Wednesday and Thursday are fruitful. Those talks will involve a 9-member delegation from Beijing. Farm Journal Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer says Chinese President Xi Jinping instructing lieutenants to try to stabilize the bilateral relationship as soon as possible. That's as trade disruptions with the U.S. could derail China's plan to remake the economy. Meanwhile, it's the tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods also seen pressured this week. That's as the U.S. Trade Representative's office faces 6 days of hearing with 370 witnesses looking into the large tariff plan. Those hearings will run through early next week. Well, as trade weighs on prices, milk futures are giving signs that $16 milk could be on the horizon. However, it's that trade piece that Mike North of Commodity Risk Management Group says could lead to a rough road when it comes to actually seeing higher milk prices this year. And he says if the U.S. doesn't manage to land a trade deal with Mexico and then Chinese trade discussions don't make headway, North thinks milk prices could see more challenges in the months ahead.
The reality is we could take that lower, and I think July was a case study in that. We saw July milk go to $14, and while I'm not forecasting $14 for any of those months in the back half or the back part of the year, it's real plausible that we could see them retract and go back to 15 something. So it's going to be a little bit of a rougher road, and that plays into the 2019 discussion too. Right now we have a $16.10 average for the whole year. We're about $15.85 for the first half of the year. Those prices, considering that we're in a really troubled trade discussion right now, are actually fairly elevated relative to what our reality has been in recent years.
Now, North does say the theme for the milk market this year will be volatility. As he says, it's a market that's very unsettled right now. Well, it's back to class time, including a refresher course on eating a healthy breakfast. In the Country is next.
In the Country, brought to you by Kubota's M7060, built to get the job done. See KubotaUSA.com or your local Kubota dealer for more information.
Well, if you've gotten a little lax over the summer months, back to school can be a great time to refocus on your routine and eating habits. Teresa Snow with the University of Missouri shows us the foods doctors recommend for starting the day.
In the Rodriguez house, 8 a.m. is go time.
You got it?
Our focus is breakfast, clothes on, backpack ready.
But it's that first step, breakfast, that can sometimes be the biggest challenge.
How do you put in enough variety and nutrition and make sure it's something they'll eat? It's a lot.
Dr. Julie Bernard is a pediatrician at University of Missouri Healthcare and an expert in weight management. She says eggs, peanut butter, or some lean deli meats are a good place to start.
One of our big hunger hormones is called ghrelin, and protein actually helps to suppress that level after you eat. So if you eat a little bit of protein, it helps you to stay fuller for longer.
Fresh fruit can also help kids stay full and focused.
Whole pieces of fruit are definitely better than fruit juice, which just tends to contain a lot of sugar and not so much the fiber that a whole piece of fruit would give you.
For drinks, Dr. Bernard says to stick with water or low-fat milk. It's a lesson this family hopes their daughters take to heart.
We want whatever eating habits they develop now to carry throughout their whole lives.
Starting with a meal that carries them through the whole day. From the University of Missouri, I'm Teresa Snow.
Thanks, Teresa. Well, that's all the time we have this morning. We're so glad you tuned in. For all of us at AgDay, I'm Tyne Morgan. Have a great day in Farm Country.